So welcome to the first session of day 2. It's going to be about routing security.
Mesdames et messieurs, bonjour.
So with me today, there's my colleague Keessun from AFRINIC and myself. We are going to walk you through routing security 101 and why is it important to secure your network. It's going to be 90 minutes of presentations, but we want to make it interactive. We want actually you to get the most of it, and if you have questions, please line up to the mic. Introduce yourself first, don't forget. And yeah, ask us questions, and let's make it useful for all of us over here. So it's basically going to be 3 sets of presentations. The first one introducing routing security, and the second one about the Internet Routing Registry at AFRINIC, and the third one about resource certification. Should we start? Yeah? Okay. So before I start, maybe I want to get a feel of the room. How many network operators do we have here? How many of you, for example, have an AS? Okay, a few, yeah, a few. I suppose you're also advertising prefixes on the internet. And I suppose you also wouldn't like it that someone else is advertising your prefix, because that would actually break your internet, right? So these are things that we are going to talk about today. So BGP is what I call the glue of the internet, because this is the protocol, the de facto protocol that everyone uses to make things work, for you to be able to create reachability on the internet. And it has been working fine so far. Very flexible protocol, very scalable as well. But one thing people forget about it is actually to add a security layer on top of that. So at the inception, BGP is what we call a protocol that is based on trust. You're here at AFPIF, you're peering with other people. And how does it work? You go in the room, you sit on a table, you do a handshake, and there it is. You can actually establish a BGP session, and you start peering. So it's mostly based on trust. But trust is brittle, right? Trust is something fragile. And you know how the internet is. There's no single point of control. And of course, there are mechanisms in place to verify authenticity or authoritativeness of information is quite limited. For example, you have routing registries. Some of them, not all of them, but some routing registries might not be as accurate as some others, or they might allow any type of routing policies to be inserted in their database, which make things a bit messy, actually. So BGP issues, you basically have 3 models of BGP security issues. You have the AS path manipulation, the BGP hijacks, and route leaks. So if you go on the news, on specific websites, for example, if you go on BGP stream, you would see BGP hijacks or route leaks happens on a daily basis. Those are examples when a Nigerian ISP, I won't name them, accidentally caused Google to be offline because of a route leak. This is very recent. Maybe Martin, if he's around, can tell you more about it, when Verizon actually knocked part of the internet offline when Cloudflare network couldn't be reached. So those type of leak can actually have big impact on especially big operators or big content delivery networks such as Cloudflare. And it is even more alarming when traffic is being intercepted by other countries, right? That you would like it to happen. It could be for many bad reasons. Could be for surveillance purposes, and you wouldn't want it to happen. But BGP, as it is right now, allows such thing to happen because there's no really control mechanisms in place. So route hijacking, what is it? So when a network operator impersonates another network operator, so I advertise your prefix whilst I am not allowed to do that, or pretends that announced prefixes are their clients. So you know BGP has some inbuilt principles. A network would accept more specifics or shortest paths. So if someone now is advertising a shorter path or a more specific, traffic will tend to go towards them. So of course, route hijacking, sometimes they are intentional. Sometimes we call them intentional, then it is malicious, or unintentional, we call them fat finger errors. And of course, as you have seen, this has created in the past, and we have quite a good track record of outages caused by BGP hijacks or route leaks. A very well-known example which we used to talk about is how YouTube was actually blocked for several hours. Because Pakistan Telecom didn't want people in Pakistan to have access to YouTube, but what happened is that they also advertised shortest paths to YouTube outside to the world, and basically YouTube traffic was now going to Pakistan Telecom and being blackholed. So this is an example of a route hijacking. So this is a classic setup. You have an ISP with two clients, ASA and ASB, connected to the internet, and you have also ASC somewhere else. There's a transit provider, ASD, and connected to a client, which is ASX. Let's say there need to be traffic flowing from ASC to ASA, so it will go through. Yeah, it should go, get the cursor working. It should go from here to here, through here, the green line basically. That's the normal path. And then at some point, ASX decides to advertise a more specific, instead of a /22, which is being advertised here by ASA, it is advertising a /24. So remember BGP principle, more specific first. What happens is that traffic instead will go towards through transit D and to ASX. So this is what we call, this is a very basic example of a hijack. And you also have route leaks. So when a network operator is multi-homing, for example, it has two streams, and accidentally announces route learned from one upstream to the other upstream. So this is a leak. They should have been filtering those announcements which they are receiving from one upstream. So the customer AS now becomes some sort of intermediary where traffic is going to flow through them. And if, for example, they cannot handle a big amount of traffic, this is when actually you see that bad things are happening. If it happens that the intermediary AS is big enough to handle a large amount of traffic, you might not even notice anything. So this is the example here. We have Google, which is reachable on 8.8.8/24 on the internet. So ASA will learn about Google from its transit provider, but ASA is also connected to another ISP. And what happens is that ASA will learn the route from its transit provider, and then it will leak it to another provider of that. By doing that, of course you will always prefer, the ISP will always prefer customer routes, and in that case, what happens is that traffic, instead of flowing along the green line here, is going to flow through the transit provider, through that intermediary AS, which is leaking the route, and then back to ASB where traffic should be going. Solutions, you have a few. You can do prefix and AF pass filtering. You can have max prefixes, limits on the prefixes you are receiving, things like that. RPKI and Internet Routing Registry, it's basically databases to actually document your routing policy. One of them is more secure than the other, but both of them works. And BGPsec is one component of it, which is actually which secures the AS path part of it. Because I remember I told you that the threat model of BGP is that you have AS path manipulation, route leaks, and route hijacking. So BGPsec is quite recent. Actually, it has only been recently standardized at the ITF, but so not so much deployed. However, we see a lack of incentive for deployment, and also a lack of reliable data. For example, as I said, there are some routing registries which has wrong information as well on routing policies or outdated information. So some stats to tell you that you should be concerned about that, about routing incidents. So for last year, we had 12,600 total incidents. So this information is coming from BGP Stream. So around 4% of ASNs were affected in the world. This is around more than 2,700 ASN were actually victim of at least one routing incident. And 1,294 networks actually caused the routing incidents. There is something we call tragedy of the commons. So it's basically a set of best practices. I won't say the name here because some people don't like that name. So I would just say that it is a set of best practices that as a network operator you should follow. So I think operating a network is like, it's like taking care of yourself. We usually talk about routing hygiene or security hygiene. As people would take care of their health, we should also take care of the health of your network. For example, you would get vaccinated such that, well, first of all, you're protecting yourself, but you don't want also to contaminate other people. So networks is the same. You would like to, for example, implement ingress filtering to prevent, for example, spoofing, because with spoofing you can create DDoS attacks, for example. So there is that BCP called BCP 38, which is about ingress filtering. So you would only allow announcement to go out only from prefixes from your network, for example. So by putting those filters, you are protecting others as well to be actually DDoSed. So the principles here are filtering. So you can prevent announcement of incorrect information by doing a few things. First, filter your own announcement, filter incoming announcement from your peers and customers, filter AS path, build filters using Internet Routing Registry and RPKI, and also you have things such as big network filters. You know the tier ones are going to be the same all the time, so you can actually put those filters such that, okay, you may or you may not be receiving announcement from them. So, and then anti-spoofing, prevent traffic with spoof source IP addresses. And then, of course, one best practice is also coordination. If you're operating a network, you're not on your own. part of a community. So coordination is actually key to for things not to break actually. So that ends the first part of the Routing Security 101. My colleague Keessun is going to talk about the AFRINIC Routing Registry as one of the components that can actually help you to secure your network. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. So in the next section, we'll be talking about the AFRINIC Routing Registry. So basically, as Amreesh said, you can always do filters, you can always do a lot of manual things, but some people won't find it sexy. So we don't like to actually do manual stuff. So you want to automate your filters and you want to do it based on something. So we'll be talking about the routing registry. It's going to be short tutorial with some details on how you can actually do it. So if you're in the room and you have your own prefixes and you know your maintainer password, you can actually do it as we go through it. If you need help, of course, we have a booth outside, the AFRINIC booth. You can just drop by and we'll help you with any questions that you have. So the routing registry at AFRINIC, we actually are having this tutorial to just increase the awareness about it, also try to get more adoption. And if you need help to migrate from the others, because historically, many of our members have been using other routing registries that might have a lot of garbage and a lot of incorrect information. We'll get to details of why and how it happened. And also, we'll talk about how you can create your route objects and the impacts of the AFRINIC IRR homing project that is currently ongoing with the RIP NCC. So in terms of the routing registry, it's not a new service. It has been here for almost now 6 years. In 2013, it was launched and it was actually showcased in one of our meetings. And till even when we went ahead with the homing project, we still had people asking about the RIP routing registry, how they can actually add their route details and how they can do it in RIP instead of coming to AFRINIC directly. Even right now, as hostmasters, we usually see people still coming to us and saying that their providers are asking them to create a route object in the RIP routing registry. So there has been some changes, and you can no longer use the RIP routing registry. We'll come into more details a bit later. But something to bear in mind is that if you're a transit provider and maybe you just have a template email, because we have seen that with one of the big operators in the region, where the salesperson would just have an email template. Okay, you have been given access. You have to go to RIP and create your route object, and then your announcement will work and everything would be okay. So please stop doing so if you still are trying to get your customers to go to RIP to create the route objects, because that's no longer applicable to you and it's not a good practice. So why you need a routing registry, Amreesh already spoke about it, how you can actually create your objects, and it can be used to automate your filtration. So if you are using tools like the IRR toolset, and there are many others, you can actually automate the filters of your BGP announcements, incoming and outgoing as well. And in terms of configs, you do have small tools that can actually give you the configs that you have to put on the router in terms of the config for any filters that you want to implement. So this would allow you to actually have more control on what's happening on your network, and then you'll be avoiding bogans, so you'll have a better and a more cleaner announcement. Like Amreesh was saying, the hygiene of what you're announcing should be clean and you have to maintain it, so that you are not announcing any nonsense and other people are not accepting nonsense as well. And depending on your specific situation, you might just need a root object or a root 6 object for the IPv6. Or you can also go and create ASNs if you have other ASNs transiting through your own network. For example, your customers have their own ASN and they transit through you. So your IP transit providers might have filters that look for the ASNs. So if you need an ASN, you just have to go ahead and create it. But it depends on the specific situation that you are in. So if you need help on that, of course, you can speak to us. In terms of the features for the AFRINIC routing registry, it's something that is open to AFRINIC resource members and even for the legacy resource holders. And it's not standalone, so it's being mirrored by the other major routing registries. Like some of the examples is AFRINIC, RIR, NCC, NTTcom, ORADB, Work Online, we have AM6. So if your provider, for example, is not querying the AFRINIC routing registry directly to make their filters, they'll still get the information if they're querying any of the other major routing registries. And in a way, it makes your lives easier because as a member, you already have your resources on the WHOIS, so it's a one-stop shop for everyone. So you don't have to juggle between objects that are in the WHOIS of AFRINIC, and then like before, some people had to go to RIPE to maintain other objects. Now you can all do it in a simple and the same interface, in fact. It's secure and stable. We'll get into details why. And just to tell you that since the launch of the routing registry, we actually have not recorded any downtime. So we can say 99.99% uptime since the launch of the AFRINIC routing registry. And something interesting is that it's given for free to you as an AFRINIC member. So many of our members, they use other paid services like ORADB or any of the other routing registries. So you just have to be aware that you're getting this same service for free at AFRINIC. And like I was saying, it's easier to use because it's a one-stop shop. If you know or you're conversant a little bit with the AFRINIC WHOIS or even the RIPE WHOIS, you'll just have to create your objects in the OPSL format and it's good to go. In terms of security, why we say it's more secure? Because historically, if you were aware about the RIPE routing registry, they had actually left it open for out-of-region objects that is not theirs, so outside the RIPE NCC's region, to come and create the objects, and they were actually doing it using the RIPE NCC OPSL maintainer, which had a publicly known password. So for example, if currently you still have objects there and changes that recently happened didn't happen, what would in fact affect you was that someone who knew that password could actually delete your root objects, and it would impact your resources and your announcements, but also it made it easier for someone to also add garbage. So they can just start hijacking your resources and add a root object that would validate that. So it was not a good practice, as you may already know. So in terms of the architecture, if you are interested in knowing how things work in the backend, so we have the WHOIS and then the routing registry, which are in terms of services separate, but you get access to it through the same web portal, or if you're using the email method through the AFRINIC dbm@afrinic.net email address. And also, in terms of objects now, if we speak about how you can actually go in and create the root objects. So objects that you would need for that and what you'll be working with mainly would be the maintainer, the OTNUM, which will be your ASN or the ASN that you want your prefixes to be announced from, the root for the V4 and the root 6 for the V6. So root objects that would actually define what's the correct origin for your prefixes. So it would all comes down to, if you're announcing a prefix and someone sees that announcement, they can actually validate who is the origin that is the correct source of that prefix. So we'll go into more details of how you can actually create the route object. And in the following sections, we'll be talking about in-region and out-region resources. So just to make sure that you understand this, if we are talking about out, it's any resource that is not managed by AFRINIC, and the in is resources that are currently being managed by AFRINIC. So resources that AFRINIC is delegating to its members or is still maintaining for legacy resource holders on the WHOIS. So this is the old workflow, and why it was like this, you will note that it's a bit more strict. If you have your prefixes out, be allowed. But in case you had your ASN out of region, for example, you had to go through a series of validation, and hostmasters had to actually intervene so that we can go ahead and execute the creation of the object. If you had both resources in region, so the ASN and the prefix, it was still okay and you could do it. So at some point when we launched the routing registry, we wanted to avoid any garbage, and the rules were really strict. And we got feedback from people, like some of them are in the room. You have Nishal, I remember there was Frank also. So I think even Ben, if you're around. So we got the community feedback, and as you know, AFRINIC being a community-based organization, we were getting feedback from the community that this is not a good practice and it's making their lives more difficult. So then at some point the workflow has been reviewed and it's much simpler now. So what we are looking at right now is that the one who is creating the root object should be the holder of the prefixes. So you have to get the maintainer password of your prefix so that you can actually create the root object. And in terms of in-region or out-of-region ASN, it doesn't really matter, but the prefix has to be in the AFRINIC routing registry or in the WHOIS itself. Maybe we'll get into more details if you have questions around how you can eventually make it more simple if you still find it not as per what you would expect from the routing registry, just after the session. So in terms of what I was saying was, if the prefix is out of region, so let's say it's from ARIN, RIPE NCC, or any of the other regional internet registries, the RIRs, we will not accept the creation of the root object compared to how it was before with RIPE. So with RIPE, you could actually create the objects earlier if the resources were not from their region. But at AFRINIC right now, if you try to create it, it will just reject. So if you have your maintainer, you could already try to go to our web portal, whois.afrinic.net on your browser. And then these are the steps that you would actually do in case you're trying to create a root object. So this is the case of if someone is trying to create a root object with an out-of-region IPv4. So you will see that you'll just have to put all the details like the prefix, description, the ASN that will have to originate it. And of course, you'll have to specify a maintainer. The maintainer can be the same maintainer that you already have from AFRINIC, or if you want to have a separate maintainer just for root objects or anything like that, you can do it. So basically, after filling in all the details, you will see the password field where you put the maintainer password, and you just click on create. And after that happens, you will see the results. So for example, this one is an out-of-region IPv4. So it will actually tell you that this is not allowed and tell you which RIR you can contact. So in this case, it's ARIN. So if you maybe are scared or you don't really know how it actually works, it's quite simple, as you saw. You just go into the portal, put the details of the prefix, the origin, and then it's good to go. So in case of you're trying to create a root object with both the prefix and the ASN in region, it's still the same thing. You go, you load the template, and then you fill in the details just like we did before. And in this case, we are using resources that are delegated by AFRINIC. So in this case, everything should be okay. So still, you just have to put your details of the prefix. And as you know, the minimum that you can put is a /24, and it can be bigger than that if you have a bigger prefix. You put the description, the ASN that you want to originate that, so which origin is the authentic source for the prefix. The change attribute, as you might know, is the details of the person who is trying to do the changes or is creating it. You put your maintainer password just like we did before, and that's it. You'll have your root object created, and you'll have the details at the bottom. It's as easy as that. But if you want to actually do a query, so you want to check what details have been created, you can do a query on the same portal, and you'll have the details at the bottom. So something to remember is that you can update the details from there if you click on update, and you'll have the details that you want to change. And to just put it in contrast with what was happening at RIPE was that you would have seen that in this case, you just go in, you create the root object, but if you were still using RIPE at the time, you had to go in and create the other objects like the auth and details of your prefixes as well, because it didn't exist on their side. So what it means is that when you're using the AFRINIC routing registry, it's easier for you. You just need your maintainer password, as you saw, and the details that you want to feed in. So now we'll move on to the RIPE routing registry and changes that happened there, but also about the AFRINIC homing project. So you might be aware that there was an update in 2016 about the AFRINIC IRR homing project. So what it meant was that the RIPE community was not agreeable to having, like we said, garbage and details that are not really relevant to them because it's external, so it's out-of-region resources being added on the routing registry, where it's quite difficult for them to validate which root object is authentic or not. So they came up with a proposed implementation for the homing project. And the first step, of course, was communication, so trying to get people to understand that you have to stop using the RIPE routing registry if you're not in the RIPE region, and that you have to actually move it to AFRINIC if you're an AFRINIC member. And then the next step of the communication, of course, would be to start locking down the routing registry, so not accepting any new resources out of region as root objects. And finally, it was a cleanup, so they just go and delete everything. That was what was proposed initially. So where are we right now? Right now, with the AFRINIC IRR homing project, we are at step 2. So what it means is that communication was already done. They actually implemented the lock, so you can no longer change any existing root object that you have on RIPE. You cannot also create any new objects if you're out of region to the RIPE routing registry. And eventually, when the lock was implemented, it was as part of the NWI 5 changes on the RIPE routing registry. And it was implemented on the 4th of September last year. So already almost a year since these changes have been done. So the RIPE NCC OPSL maintainer that I mentioned before is no longer there. You no longer have access to the publicly known password for that maintainer because it's no longer existing. And you can no longer create any out-of-region resources. Like I was saying, if you had to create your root object earlier on, you had to actually create the ASN and the other details. So now they no longer support that. You can no longer create any root objects as well. And any existing non-RIPE resources, root objects with out-of-region prefixes like the V4 and V6 or ASN have been moved to a new source called the RIPE no-auth. So when you query your root objects, if it's still there, you'll no longer see the same source that it was before as just RIPE. And any eventual or upcoming action will be based on the RIPE database working group discussions. And so far, we haven't really seen a hint of when the delete will happen, but I would encourage you to start migrating your root objects if you haven't done so. And also, if you have new objects to create, you can, of course, use the AFRINIC routing registry. What was the impacts of the NWI5 implementation? So maybe if someone in the room knows about it, we had one big operator in Egypt that was actually impacted hugely by this change because their upstream were filtering announcements based on root objects, and they were looking at the source of RIPE. So when the source changed to RIPE no off, they started dropping announcements. And you might know already that what would happen is the customers no longer have access to the internet, they had the traffic affected, and then there was a lot of people not happy. So how you can future-proof yourself in case the delete happens is that you start moving away from the RIPE no off, and you start creating your objects in the proper routing registry. You can come to AFRINIC, or if you want to use another one, it's your choice. But we highly recommend that you don't lose time and start adopting the AFRINIC routing registry. So in terms of adoption, what AFRINIC has been doing during our meetings, during events like we did since around 2 or 3 years, where we have been working with our members. So we have the buffs during AFRINIC meetings, regional events like AFPIF, iWeek, SAFNOG, where we have been speaking about the routing registry, how you can use it, how you can actually get help in case you're stuck with something. But also we have been organizing boot camps. So when we contact our members, if we see that they are not using our routing registry and they still have objects on the RIPE no off, we start asking them to move on and to actually get help from us. And also, if you want to be independent and actually check your details, you can go to an excellent tool called IRR Explorer. So you can access it on the link in red. And it's actually quite helpful for you to see what you're announcing on BGP and is it consistent with root objects that are on RIPE, AFRINIC, and any other routing registry. And if you see garbage or you see things that are not up to date, you should, of course, as a network operator, start acting on that and clean up any wrong root objects because you don't want fat fingers or any filtration to happen and your current authentic announcements being filtered out instead of having the proper ones being used. So in terms of numbers, you will see there has been a steep adoption, and we see a lot of objects being created, especially since the NWI5 was implemented. But this is in terms of the number of root objects, but also in terms of the amount of members that we have, so AFRINIC members who actually started using that. You will see that it's roughly more than 50% of our membership have already started using the AFRINIC routing registry. So for the remaining ones, if you're in the room, if you're an AFRINIC member, you have, or even a legacy resource holder with IP resources, so V4 or V6, and you don't have your root objects on the AFRINIC routing registry and you need help with that, we have a booth outside. Please come and talk to us. You can speak to me and the member services team. And also, some recommendations that we keep repeating in all our interventions is that if you have people leaving your company, please update your contact details because this is very crucial when we have to get in touch with you or you want your maintainer being reset or any confidential information being sent to you. Ensure that your maintainer passwords are kept up to date. We recently had a case that was unfortunately beyond our control where an ex-employee just left the company and still had the maintainer password. And what they started doing is deleting the root objects or creating wrong root objects. And you can imagine already that the company was impacted and the ex-employee was no longer under employment, so they had no control and they were just helpless until they came in and updated their contact details, asked for a reset, and eventually get everything working again. Also concerning the changes, like I mentioned, for the homing project, we don't have a date for the deletion, but please don't wait for the deletion to happen to come to us. You can be proactive and move your resources and root objects already to the AFRINIC routing registry, and you will be future-proof in case any changes happen in the future. We are here to help, so you can contact us on IRO at afrinic.net. It's a dedicated queue just for the routing registry. You have the hostmaster email address. We also have the database working group where you can talk to us, you can put forward your recommendations and what you want to see. We actually have Frank in the room, who is the co-chair for the DB working group. So if you want to speak to him, he's just here, you can wave. Yeah, thank you. So please come and talk to us, and we'll be happy to help you with any questions that you have. But then again, like Amreesh was saying, the routing registry is one step towards the routing security. But do we want more security? Because as I said, we do have other routing registries that are not as strict as AFRINIC, where there could be garbage, and you might not totally believe them or trust them based on the announcements or the root objects that they're holding. So what we'll be talking about now is RPKI, and I'll hand over to Amreesh. But just before that, if anyone in the room has any comments or questions, you can shoot, and then we'll move on to RPKI.
Okay, I'm Hussein Badran from Egypt, system engineer. I'm not into much into networks, but I would like to ask a question. When you create a routing object in the AFRINIC RIR, when you put the information about the prefix, does it have to be attached with the ASN number, or you can just put any prefix in the record?
So I'll give you an example. Let's say I'll take the example of AFRINIC. We have a prefix, for example, just for the discussion, 196.0.0.0/24. So we'll say that we want to announce that through AS3999, for example. So we'll go in and put the prefix, so the specific /24/20/16, whatever it is, and which ASN is the correct originator of that. So when you're doing BGP, you'll be announcing prefixes through an ASN to other providers. So you're just specifying which ASN is the correct one. So let's say the peer on the other side, if he sees two announcements coming in, one with the correct ASN and another one with, let's say, AS42 or another ASN, so then they will be able to filter based on the root object, because they'll be looking at which origin is coming in. So if they see the correct ASN, they'll just let it go through. But if they see a rogue ASN, they'll just filter it out.
Yes, I'm asking this question because I think errors might happen also as well. So
Yeah.
The one that who is putting the information in this application, he might also put a rogue or a wrong, incorrect information about the ASN, the prefix.
So you mean, for example, if someone is typing?
I mean, someone can be a hijacker, for example, so he can do both scenarios in and out in the application and the outside, and he's advertising the prefixes.
Normally,
You know what I mean?
Normally what happens is that when you're creating the route object, you have to authenticate with a maintainer, which is the maintainer that is under the prefix, so the v4, for example. And if you don't have the maintainer password, you won't be able to create it. So let's say you as a member, you have your maintainer, and you know your password, so you can create it. So if you're doing, for example, you're creating a route object, and instead of AS42, for example, you just type AS4, you mistyped it. But on your announcements, you're doing AS42, so it will be filtered out because it's not matching to what ASN it should be. But also, if you put any ASN that you want to, it will allow you.
Okay,
it's based on
the other way around. So if the SN is correct, but the prefix is wrong,
you won't be able to do that, because if the ASN is correct and the v4 or the v6 is incorrect, it will actually prompt you because the maintainer password will not be relevant to the same. So for example, if you have 196.0.0.0/24 and the maintainer is, let's say, maintainer 1, you mistype the 196, you just type like 19, for example, and when you try to authenticate, it will tell you that this is either not in the region for AFRINIC or the maintainer password is not correct, because each member has a separate maintainer. So each member has their own maintainer, which is confidential to them. If you don't have the maintainer password, you won't be able to create it. So this is the level of security. But now in terms of incorrect ASNs being added, so like I was saying before, we as hostmasters were intervening just to check, but right now we leave it to the prefix holder to specify the correct ASN. But basically, if you're doing wrong ASN with the wrong, so the root object with the wrong ASN, but you're not doing the announcement, it's only if that ASN starts announcing it that it will impact you. But unless that, it will not really impact you. And if the ASN is not correct, you'll already be filtered out by your transit provider, so you'll have to go in and correct it as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Does it answer
Yes,
to
yes,
your question?
Yeah. Thank you.
Please.
Good morning. My name is Grace. I'm coming from Rwanda, from the Internet Exchange Point of Rwanda. I'm an AFRINIC member. I just have a question. When do you have to plan to integrate all of this into my AFRINIC portal?
Okay, so this is a question that we have been getting, I'll admit, in many of our interactions. Right now, we do have internal projects that are running, that are going on, but I don't personally have a date when it's going live. But we do have plans to integrate it into the My AFRINIC portal, where it's the member portal where everyone, any member has access to. But there has been discussions on the mailing list as well. We had questions from Unfortunately, it was not met due to other projects, but we still are waiting for a new commitment on that. I'll admit we are late on that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Simon Maye from SICOM. For the out-of-region resources,
Yes.
If I add them to your system, the system allows it, but it doesn't work. Can you disable that thing so that it doesn't accept and then?
Region ASN or?
Resources is like all. I can be able to add, but somehow no error I can get. And then for some, it doesn't work, of course. It's not supposed to work, yeah.
Okay, because right now, from all the tests and everything that we know about is that when you add any prefix like V4 or V6, which is not from AFRINIC, it will reject it and tell you which RIO you have to contact. But the ASN can be out of region. That's based on a change that was requested by the DB working group. But if you have a specific case with a V4 or V6 out of region being added on the routing registry at AFRINIC, we can of course talk about it. But I'm pretty sure it's only the ASN that is allowed out of region right now.
Okay, and second one, we have the, I think whatever has been asked now, the My AFRINIC and now the two forms.
The integration.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Which one are you making as your primary? Because it can't be, I say, for me, I did on this platform, and then the other person I did on My AFRINIC. Are you going to centralize to make sure that there's only one tool which works?
This is in fact something that I was saying earlier on, is that we do have plans to integrate both of them to make it easier for members to use. But unfortunately, we have not been able to meet the committed deadline for Q1 of 2019. So we are waiting internally as well from our development team to get a new date, and then we'll be able to communicate to everyone. Because I understand that right now, we don't have a deadline right now, unfortunately.
Hello, my name is Nishal Govardhan. I'm the Internet Exchange Point Manager for Inc. South Africa. I have about 200 peers that are requesting that you make this an urgent priority for your development team, as this is something that has been requested before. So as I've requested from you for more than 2 years now, I would like you to focus on integrating the Internet Routing Registry into your management portal. Would you like me to list the names of my 200 peers, which are all AFRINIC members,
Okay,
that are seconding this call? Because I do have that list with me.
in fact, I can share that internally, every time that you have been saying, you have been giving your feedback, it has been relayed accordingly.
So thank you. Yes, I recognize it is a development goal. I would like you to make it an urgent development
Noted. Yes. Thank you. Yes, Frank.
Hello, my name is Frank Herwicht. First of all, no particular hats wearing now, we would really like an update to hear sometime soon from you guys about progress or expected deadline for this development. And secondly, another issue, and now I'm wearing the hat of Simbanet Tanzania, member of AFRINIC. We would like to delete some INET objects of /23, even if there are reverse DNS delegations and so on. That's another topic.
So about that topic, in fact, we noted that there is something not working as per what you want. I think we have discussed this of this platform as well. So internally, what we are currently doing is we are doing an impact assessment of any change that we'll be doing to ensure that it's not breaking something else. And as soon as it's completed, and then we have a proper impact analysis, and we are sure that it's not breaking, like for example, no reverse NS assigned or any other policy, we'll of course deploy it under production and we'll let you know. But we do have a quick fix that we can sit down with you to work on. So we can do something else. If you cannot delete it directly right now.
Thank you.
Hi, Andrew here from Liquid Telecom. I have another development request which has been made over the years several times. REST APIs into the whole routing registry for root objects, for other objects, etc. As I've stated at many microphones many times, if you look at most of the big IPAM systems out there that manage the space, which is a requirement that it's in databases, etc., for me to get more space, etc., all of those systems integrate via REST. And it's now 3 years since I've made this request.
Okay.
And so I'm going to make it again, and I'm going to ask you, please, can we get a status on when we are going to get full REST integration for all of this stuff? Because as far as I know, and if it is there and I've seen no communication on it, then let me know. If it's not, when is it coming? Because it really is becoming a problem when, if you're sitting with vast numbers of IPs and blocks. This is 2019. We can't keep doing this all manually.
Yes.
Automation is the future, and if I can't automate because of lack of REST and all the rest of it, and screen scraping emails and text scraping emails, well, as I said, this is 2019.
Yeah. In fact, I can share that the Whois does have a REST API, but it's not open to the public. So I'll take this comment again, and I'll share any feedback that we get internally from this. Because the Whois itself and the routing registry, they do have a REST API, but it's not open to the public, if I'm not mistaken. Because like internally for me, when I work with the AFRINIC routing registry, we use the REST API. But it's not open to everyone, I guess, right now. So we'll get back to you on this one.
Andrew, a question for you. Would you like to use the REST API for creation of objects or for query only?
So our IPAM system and many others, if I create something in my IPAM system, it needs to be able to put it in there. If I delete something from my IPAM system, it needs to be able to put it in there. It's creation, deletion. Basically, I have a centralized system for managing address allocations internally, and I need to be able to integrate that with the RIR because of the numbers of changes that are being made through there.
Hi, Kishan. Hi, Amreesh. I'm Chitesham from La Sentinelle. I have a question related. I came across the AFRINIC Fellowship Program. I think it's pertaining to AFRINIC's capacity building strategy. I would like to know how does AFRINIC assess the success of the fellowship? Are there any success story records or anything else about do they follow up on their fellows?
I don't really have the details at hand right now, but what I can do is we do have a fellowship committee who actually looks after that. I can, if you can give me your contact details, I'll tell them to get in touch with you directly. And if there are more people interested in having details for the fellowship, we'll of course share it with everyone.
Okay, great.
All right, thank you.
Hi, Arturo Servin from Google. Maybe to follow up with the previous comment and also to clarify a bit of the use case for the REST API. For example, in our case, we have a lot of space, and we need to create dynamically. We change, for example, RRR changes. So the whois interface doesn't help because it's like a query, and we need to push, we need to do a post to say, hey, this is the new route object that we want to update. I don't know how many networks will have this problem, maybe some. In our case, it's big because we have around maybe 1,000 ROAs that we need to create and maintain, and do it manually is kind of difficult. Same for route objects. Right now, basically, we are sending emails, but it's, as it was mentioned, it's not something that is sustainable. So I guess that the RRR needs to evolve to support post and REST queries, well, not queries, but an interface that we can manage. Today, the interface that we have today is like 20 years ago when we didn't have that, so we need to update it.
So does anyone of you know if any IRR is actually allowing any REST interface, or?
No, IRR doesn't support it.
Okay.
That's the one that we use at Google, for example.
Because I suppose there need to be some amount of standardization, right? And well, AFRINIC cannot by itself come with own standardized things. So I suppose there need to be some stuff happening at the ITF level, I suppose. I don't know.
No, there is actually stuff at the very least, there is stuff in ARA. Because if you look at the stuff in something like 6Connect, which was the IPAM system developed by Aaron Hughes and the 6Connect company, that has direct API integration into Aaron, and I believe it has it into RIPE. I'd need to confirm. So there is definitely an interface that the other RIRs are using.
Okay, maybe something that I can share, like I was saying, the whois REST API right now is restricted to only the internal system. So you have the web portal that you use, like the gentleman was saying, where you push any creation or whatever. So it uses the REST API to talk to the whois. And then even the email method would use the REST API, but it's not open to the public, like I was saying. So it was mainly done, if I'm not mistaken, for security measure that we don't want it to be open so that people don't misuse it. But we could try to work with everyone, maybe on the DP working group, for example, and try to find a way where we open it up and also ensure that there is a level of security where we avoid stuff happening.
I mean, could you not just check to the other RIRs and figure out how they're doing it? Because it is available in the other RIRs, because the IPAM system is integrating with
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Andrew.
Okay.
Hello, Keessun.
Yes.
I think that you have enough. I think you guys are smart enough to figure out the technology on your own. It's not our job to prescribe. My name is Nishal Gobadan, community member, AFRINIC member. I am happy to help beta test your REST system if you make it available to the community via the DB working group or such. I look forward to the announcement for the beta and optional test opt-in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Moi, je suis burundais.
I am for we have a more serious problem because for Burundi,
donc le monsieur là n'a pas pu mettre en place le point d'échange. Et par après, il y a une autre personne qui a voulu mettre le point d'échange. Lui aussi, on lui a attribué des ressources, mais lui aussi, il n'a pas réussi parce qu'il a voulu le faire d'une façon personnelle. Et par après, c'est par le gouvernement que, à travers de la RCT, on a mis en place le point d'échange. Donc pour le moment, on n'a pas de ressources qu'on utilise. On utilise tout simplement des ressources qui sont pour le BBS. C'est le BBS qui nous a prêté des ressources. Donc vous entendez bien qu'on a un problème.
I remember there was that issue with the IXP. If you're here, it's a good thing. Please come and talk to us. We'll take it off this platform because it implicates confidential information that we have to speak to you about. So please come and see us when you have some time, just at the AFRINIC booth, and then we'll speak about it.
Merci.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions before we move to RPKI? No? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Keessun. That was quite interesting. How do we make things more secure? As we were saying, the routing registries are there. Actually, we would encourage all our members to use AFRINIC routing registry, which is I would say very clean. But it is not as other routing registries are not as clean as ours. So what is a more secure way to do things is to use cryptography. And this is what RPKI is used for. RPKI stands for Resource Public Key Infrastructure. So as you know, AFRINIC and the other RIRs are the one allocating address spaces. And by being the party responsible for allocation of IP resources, we are also going to allocate certificates to members. So this certificate is used in that RPKI system to actually allow you to create a secure routing announcement. So there are two types of certificates in RPKI. There is one called the certificate authority. So as a member, AFRINIC will give you a certificate, and in that certificate you will have a list of resources. So basically, by doing that, we are certifying that you are the right holder and the only holder of resources that have been allocated to you. And then there is another type of certificate that as a member you can generate. It's called an entity certificate, which is used for doing digital signature. And this certificate is used to actually sign what we call routing announcement to make ROAS, root origin authorization. So this is a quick example. AFRINIC in the RPKI hierarchy is for you the topmost certificate authority. And if you're an ISP and you have been allocated resources, we would issue you a certificate. So in that case, ISP1. And if yourself you are issuing to other ISPs, for example, you are suballocating resources, you would issue another certificate to another ISP. Or if you just want to create a ROA, you would issue an entity certificate to sign a ROA. But this is what happens internally. For you, it's for the end user, it's quite actually straightforward. There's no need to get into the certificates and so on, as I will explain later on. As an RIR, and as other RIRs as well, we have what we call repositories. So what is happening right now is that there need to be a topmost certificate authority, which is called a trust anchor. Normally it should have been the IANA, but IANA is not currently doing that role. So each of the RIRs is actually maintaining their own root certificate. So there are two ways to do RPKI. There is a hosted way, which is currently the case. So by hosted, it means that AFRINIC is going to manage your certificate environment, your PKI. So you basically come to AFRINIC, generate a private key and certificate. We will manage that for you. And we will also manage the publication of the public part of this certificate as well. The delegated mode is when you decide to have your own certificate authority, and then you decide to generate your own certificate, and AFRINIC being the provider or the issuer of your own certificate. So a very important component of RPKI is the repository, where all the certificates and root origin authorization objects are in there, and it basically contains the hierarchy, the whole hierarchy of certificates in that repository. So this is a quick demo. So very easy. You go on resource certification on my AFRINIC portal. So this is how you create a ROA. You put a name, you select an AS number. or you can add any AS number, even an AS number which is out of region. You select your resources. You can add multiple resources in a ROA as opposed to a route object, which makes it more convenient. And there is also one cool thing about ROAs is that you can actually put max length. So for example, if you're advertising, let's say, /20, but you want it to be covered up to the individual /24s in that hierarchy, you can use what we call max length. And a route origin, a ROA object has a start date and end date, so you can actually plan in advance when are you going to use those ROAs. So then this is what happens on the AFRINIC side, which allows you actually to create a ROA saying that this AS, whichever AS actually, is allowed to advertise a prefix which you own, and you are only you're the only one authorized to do that because you have been allocated a certificate by AFRINIC. And we publish those ROAs in a repository, and on the relying party side, we have what we call trusted local caches or validators, which connects to the repositories and downloads all the objects and do some crypto magic to do the validation part. And once we have the list of valid objects, a BGP speaker, which would want now to build filters, as you are currently building filters with a routing registry, you would also build filters now against RPKI. You would basically tell your router to connect to a validator and just pull the list of validated objects from the validators. Then there is some matching which is done. So on one side, you're receiving a route announcement from your peers or from your customers. So then, based on the table you got from the validator, you will now tag the announcement as valid. Valid, it means that there's a matching or covering prefix that was found with a matching AS number from the ROAs, or it is invalid. There is a covering prefix was found, but the AS number did not match. And then not found, it means that there is no ROA covering that routing announcement. So there are, I would say, two types of policy that you can do. You can say that you are fairly secure. It means that you would give a higher preference to valid prefixes, to valid announcement, and a lower preference to those there is no ROA covering those announcements. Or if you want to be paranoid, which we'd actually recommend you to be, you drop the invalid. So you only accept valid announcement. But well, this can actually also not work for you. But at least if you give higher preference to valid, that's great. There are a bunch of tools that you can use as validator. So AFRINIC offer you a validator, so you can connect to the AFRINIC validator, or you can use your own validator. There are a bunch of them: RIPE validator, Arsenic, and now Routinator is quite a new one. And of course, you would, for example, if you have created a ROA and you would like to know whether a prefix is covered by a ROA, you can go to the looking glass, different looking glasses such as Hurricane Electric or RIPEstat would give you details whether your routing announcement is actually covered or not by a ROA or any other routing announcement, actually. Yes, I'm done. So questions? That was quick. Yeah.
So what steps are you doing probably to encourage guys to be able to sign and validate their resources?
Say that again?
What efforts are you making to encourage people to, yeah?
Well, we talk about our, like this service, every time we go to a meeting or we do when we do training. So right now we don't have a specific training course on RPKI or routing registry, but we do have workshops. And in those workshops, we actually encourage people to come and create their route objects and create their ROAs actually. So this is something you can actually come and create your ROAs. It doesn't mean that someone is actually using your ROAs to filter them. So there's no harm actually getting a certificate from AFRINIC and creating your ROAs.
So your resources, AFRINIC, are they valid? Are they signed? Everything?
So
I think I saw some 3 ASNs and a couple of.
So you mean resources that have been allocated to AFRINIC as the secretariat?
Correct, yeah. From the peering bilaterals, we had a list of resources.
A few of them, I know a few of them that have ROAs. Maybe some of them don't have ROAs, but I need to check with the IT team. Yeah.
Yeah, because I thought it should, you guys should lead by example. And the reason why I'm asking is we've been trying to push around, that is in the Africa region and then in the AFRINIC region. I think 2 operators have complied, that's SICOM and Work Online, and we thought you coming on board increases the numbers, so maybe.
Yeah, definitely. I think, yeah, definitely there need to be more promotion and more, promotion around both routing registry and RPKI actually, because they both are needed and can actually both can be used.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So I think take a point and have yours signed, validated, so
sure.
that when you do examples, trainings, you can use it as an example.
Hi, Jérôme Fleury, Cloudflare. On the subject of validating, I would strongly suggest to drop invalids, whatever happens. As you mentioned, like you strongly recommend that. Lowering the local pref is like saying if someone sends an invalid more specific, it will become valid. So don't do that. On the subject of software validators, you forgot that Cloudflare is actually offering Octo RPKI, free open source RPKI validator.
Thanks. Thanks for that.
That's not really a question.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, I'm from Vishal from Rogers Capital. I've seen that for now, for the RPKI, you will be using your own root certificates on your repos, right? And the ISPs will be relying on the repos. Yep. So what happens if the repos are down? What will happen to those ISPs using the certificates on your repos?
So the system is made in such a way that whatever information is in the repo is valid for at least 2 days, right? So if a validator has downloaded the repo, so whatever information is there is at least valid for the next 2 days. So, so we hope that within 2 days, AFRINIC can fix a repo which is not working. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, Nishal again. I was going to make the point that Jerome made, which is, remember that shortest, most specific is always going to win. So you always want to drop the invalids. But what's probably worth noting is that you don't even need to do that if you're running modern routing operating systems anymore. So for example, iOS XE, I recently found out, drops invalids by default. So you don't actually have to do anything as long as you configure your cache, presumably it'll do the magic for you. I don't really run a big network anymore. Maybe someone else can tell you the story with Junos and XR and whatever else is out there.
So you mean that RPKI is enabled by default?
No, you obviously need to configure what your validating cache is going to be.
Okay.
But once XE speaks to your validating cache, XE will drop invalids by default. So you don't even actually have to configure anything. And yes, please drop invalids. Also, a shout out, thank you to Cloudflare. I think that their software is really good. We use it at the Exchange personally. I would recommend that and Routinator if people are looking looking for alternatives because they're both open source, they both work really well. The RIPE NCC validator is very buggy, so unless you want to spend time trying to figure out what's going on, stay away from it.
Quite resource intensive as well. Thank you. Yes. So I have one announcement before we leave, is that we have, there is a box here with a very interesting gadget called Oculus, what? Oculus Quest. And it's apparently a VR device. And what's the deal?
So what has been happening is that if you're, as part of trying to get people to be more interested with the RPKI and then what Amreesh was speaking about, manners. So we have an initiative from Mitsuki who reached out to us. If you're currently doing RPKI and you're compliant to the manners framework, you can come to see us at the AFRINIC booth. You give us your AS number and your contact details. There will be a raffle tomorrow at 4 p.m. So if you are the lucky winner, this is what you'll get from the raffle. So please drop by, and in case you're not doing RPKI as well, we'll give you the steps of how you can actually start doing it and how to set up your the first steps and how you can get it up and working. So thank you very much. And Nishal was telling me that you can go out any of the 2 exits for coffee and 15 minutes. So please come back after 15 minutes for the next session. And we thank you very much for your attention in the morning session. Thank you.